So I got to be careful. All right, now I got to keep tone the sarcasm way down like I'm in class. All right. Um, so this is a variation, though I've tweaked it and updated it from November. This actually came about, yeah, out of COVID because fall of 2020, I had an online pre-cal class, and we all knew how that was going to go with students. If you ask the typical, even before AI, if you ask the typical pre-cal questions, right, Magic Google will do wonders. So this was sort of my response to that, and some of it's morphed into also just how using what generally think are decent or good or interesting questions, or my students have other names for them that often involve four letters. Um, and so for that. So first of all, oh, come on, there. So what does resistant mean today to AI? And that is not going to be that AI is going to get everything wrong. That especially in a pre-cal class, that's just not happening. And some of you are smiling, I can see, so you get the reference. Yay! What it does mean is that the AI either won't get it all or will have some very interesting responses. So, first of all, um, are you aware of Google Lens? And if not, let me hit all the right buttons to, no, not that, to show you Google Lens. Ah, one. Right. So here's a question in a web page. I'm going to right click, search this tab with Google Lens, and it thinks for a little bit or a lot bit. And oh, so step for the integral. And viola, as the French might very poorly say, there's the solution to integration by parts for that with a link to the video. Now, I did notice I have online classes running right now, and I did notice that our online proctoring system has now included a flag for they right-clicked on a page. But if you did not know that that was out there, yeah, it's a built-in, right? So I didn't have to click away or anything else like that. Um, yeah, so it's out there and it's very everywhere. All right, let's see. Now I need to go back to this one. Yes, I know it's me. I'm going to get all the right buttons. This button. There. Okay. All right. So for instance, I just asked Magic Google, didn't even ask the AI version, but of course, at this point, Google's AIing whatever this question, and there you go. That's what it spat out to me, right? Which is a correct answer, right? So what used to be a quote unquote hard pre-cal question is not hard anymore, so to speak. So I tested these, and this was true within the last month. I dump an image of each of these into Google and other AI. And as it said, none of them got all of it correct, but they each got some where that some varies depending on the particular question and the particular AI and whatnot. Um, so for the moment, these are resistant. How much longer? Who knows? That's a whole nother discussion with data centers and AI and funding and whatever. Um, but I would caution you if you are teaching online or give even a take home thing. Um, yeah, what's a good assessment anymore? Whoops. Um, Oral exams, video exams, right? There's various apps where they can record a video and answer, which probably means it's just you're only adding a layer with them reading the answer, but there you are. Um, okay, so and then at the end, I have a link to where Word document copies of all these are. Feel free to edit them. At the moment, they are not designed to be fully accessible, so you'll have to double check that because that at the moment that's way down the list of things to convert into accessibility because I don't have an online pre-cal class. I have online other classes that I'm scrambling to meet all that deadlines. But these are the sorts of things that you'll find out. And while I'm at it, if you're looking for more ideas of where to come up with curveball, tend to call them curveball questions. Here's some sources. The MAA, the Math Association of America, put out a book around 2000 or level 4 calculus problems for a new century because right even then Maple and Mathematica were rendering a lot of what we thought of as hard questions not so hard. They've got a lot of very good questions. And then there's a whole front section on pre-calculus stuff too and functions. If you're not familiar with the website, Open Middle, it's also a really good one on a lot of interesting sort of questions. Spreadsheets are good for answering those because Open Middle tends to do a arrange the integers 1 through 9 using them at most once to make this quadratic do something. And so, yeah, lots of fun questions. Hughes Hallett, or they have several ones, including functions, modeling change, or in general, concept test or clicker questions are also good sources. Lots of people have them online. Um, and I found this out, maybe you have or have not. Every class now, I have to talk with my class about the difference between what I call conversational English and math ease. Because a lot of even my engineering calculus students, well, it's always true. How do you know that? Well, I did it for a quadratic and I did it for a cubic, so it works for every function. Okay, let's talk about this. What when math geek versus normal conversation when we talk about proving and true and everything else like that. Um, right, and so that's an interesting discussion with the students to have, and the difference in why. Right, if you haven't had that discussion about why reading mathematics is very different than reading anything else. Okay, so some ideas for making the questions more interesting or whatever. Putting parameters in eh, generally makes it a little hard. It definitely makes it hard for students. Not so much for AI. I'm going to show an example here in a second. Um, with an interval question. Some other things I've started doing is having students actually grading an AI response. That gets them frustrating. Or if the AI produces an answer, well, how do they get from here to here? And this one really hacked off my Cal 2 students. AI gave a wrong answer to a question. So I said, okay, now what question would this be the correct answer for? And they were not happy with me because it actually turned out it was really hard to come up with that. All right, so let me show you. Uh, nope, I don't need that anymore. I need this. Okay, so I dumped this into Chat GPT. This one yesterday, I just asked this question: for what values of R is the equation y equal Rx plus B within 3 units of the origin? And here's the answer it came up with. So for instance, my first question for my students is, well, why did it reorganize my equation into this equation? And then it says the distance from the origin to a line is given by this formula. Well, how do you know that? Is that true? And then this one, so it just says, well, square both sides. Well, can you square with an absolute value in there? Does that cause problems? And I'm willing to bet at least some of us, even in this audience, had to stop and think for a few seconds about, wait, what? Ooh, could you do that? What? Right? And then eventually it comes down to that answer. So just for grins, because this interactive slider, you can't see what's going on. I just saved the web page. So I did it again this morning. Notice the answer's different. Now the same, but different order of steps and stuff. So you could even, one thing I've done is have students go to their favorite AI, make sure it's at least 3 of them, and compare answers given. But here you notice that now they've even put in sliders in the answer about what's going on, which is kind of interesting. I'm right. And notice here it does not, it just says solve. It doesn't talk about scoring the absolute value or whatever. Right. Um, so these are some fun things that that I ask my students about, trust and verify sort of thing. And one of the reasons I do this, because they all start to get gripey, so here's one of the Cal 2 questions I have my students grade is arc length. If you remember arc length, great. If not, it doesn't really matter for this example. It starts perfect answer, perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, 1 + 1/4 is 5/4 to the 3/2. 5/4 to 3/2 is obviously 125/64. Wow. AI was doing so great. It blocked basic arithmetic. And so this is one that I bring up and with all my students is like, look, it's a trust but verify issue with this. You've got to be smart enough or well enough equipped to know that this answer it's spitting out is actually reasonable or not. I said, because right, if you just glanced at this and hadn't checked the arithmetic, you're all like, oh, this looks good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oops. Right. And I think this is one of the things we can help our students with is kind of warning them about, okay, hey, you've got to be careful about this. All right, wait, no, come back. That button. Right. Okay. I know there's a way you can jump, but all right. So one now online, obviously, I just would throw them out there at a certain time frame. Okay, figure this out, provide your explanation, and go. But they worked well enough that I brought them into a face-to-face class. Um, and so I gave them as take-home assignments. Of course, you can imagine how that went with pre-cal and a take-home class questions. And then sometimes I put these on exams, though once I pop up the questions here, it's gonna make sense. I really had to be very careful about what I asked on an exam because these are higher cognitive load, and I didn't want to just slaughter the grades on this. Mostly I've resorted to doing it as group work sort of a thing. Um, and when my students do group work, they can use their notes, they can use their classmates. Some of them are obviously trying to sneak, or some of them are bla blatantly having their laptops open while doing it. So the AI resistance still kind of helps in that regard. Okay, so there's a uh, somebody's going to have to holler at me if there's something amazing in the chat or that I need to address that I'm missing because
I
with
got you,
everything,
Rob.
okay, everything else going on my screen, I'm not going to see anything on that regard. All right. So this is one of them, right? A basic line question. And I just ask, all right, which of these must be true? Um, and then I say that the graph is to scale. If you really want to frustrate students, don't put that note in there and then see what their answers are. Um, and that gives them all sorts. And as I even have done that, I said, okay, if this was not to scale, right, could you still make any of these? Could you actually even answer any of these questions, right? And you still could some, right, as long as because it's fairly clear G is larger than E. Don't know about F and H, but yeah, right. And then some absolute values in here to wrestle with this. Chat and other AIs only ran about a 70% correct on this one. They all the absolute values seem to throw them off a monkey wrench. They did not like absolute values on this, right? But you can right, and so these are all sorts of basic but fun questions for them to wrestle with, sort of thing. And the same picture, right? So I have said the same picture. It's line 3 and line 4 because the other set of questions that's on the Google Drive have all four lines running around. So then it asks, okay, well, if I knew that the slope of line 3 was exactly 2, now what does that change? Right? Oh, well, now I know that, right, F over E has to be a certain ratio, et cetera, et cetera. Or if I knew that line 3 was only -2 times the slope of line 4, does that give me any information that I can use to narrow down some of this stuff? And some of these answers are repeated and some are obviously different, but these sorts of ideas, this sort of thing with, okay, so here's a graph of a function. If I take f of 0.5x, what happens to all this stuff? What happens to those slope triangles? What happens to the lines, the length of E, F, and G, for instance? Stuff like that, right? These sorts of questions. And obviously you can permute the 0.5x to do all sorts of other things. Function composition, I said, right, make the 3 different slopes of the difference in the sum. And then, okay, does A have to be bigger than B for, or less than, or so forth? I do, okay. Right, or here, when we get to polynomials, oh, well, okay, does f of x have to be this? Right, and it's interesting to me how many of the students don't realize what it means to be a root of a polynomial, even though we've talked through that and discussed that. And computationally, if I ask them something, they'll crank it out. But in terms of algebraic forms of a polynomial and stuff, it takes them a little bit to get a hold of stuff like this, right? And then the input-output questions, f of 0 equals m or f of m equals 0. What does that mean to be on a point? And again, while we're staring at this going, oh, that's simplistic, for a lot of my students, this function notation, I'm sure you encountered it too, just is a foreign thing to them. What are we talking about with this notation and what's going on? Right. And then various slope question kind of things and stuff like this going on. When we get to logs, right? I have here's an exponential function. And then, oh, okay, what does it have to be the form of? Right. So here I'm taking advantage of the fact that I've done a vertical transformation. So P must be larger or smaller than to make it shift up or down enough to Right. That's a interesting sort of way to throw in, hark back to transformations. I kind of stumbled on it, and have them start talking about, oh, well, wait, is this really a right? And then when we get to logs, there's a what I call conversion version, uh, conjunction junction, conversion version of it, where, oh, yeah, if this is the log equation, then that means, and the other part of this is an exponential side of it. Oh, well, then if this is the log equation, then it must mean e to the or b to the whatever must be bigger than p or less than p or et cetera on that. And then when we get to trig, and you can't, it's hard to read, I know on the screen, but it's the words alpha, beta, theta, and lambda in there. Um, and of course, I'm measuring alpha, theta, and beta not in the normal way. And so alpha greater than 3 pi over 4 throws all of them for a loop. Um, AI totally bombed this question. Like at best, it was getting 25% because it was assuming that we were all measuring from the standard reference angle around in trig class. But again, by the picture, we're not. Um, and so then I even have a discussion with the students. Well, what if alpha is greater than 3 pi over 4? Where does that put the triangle? And then, we have to spend some time drawing pictures and spinning around, and they're not happy with me. But I find it to be a good exercise. And okay, we really just picked this point at random, well, kind of at random to start measuring from. What if we wanted to measure from somewhere else? What does that do to all of our reference things? What is involved with this? That actually led to a long, interesting discussion about, um, why do we choose certain things in mathematics, and why do we not choose certain things in mathematics? And why does the magnetic compass have 0 at the top, but our zeros at the right? And those sorts of things. Um, all right. Um, yeah, AIs, whether you put a disclaimer on there or not, AI doesn't care. It's going to scrape it and scoop it up. So if you post these in an open web page, maybe even behind my Google Drive, I don't know, they're going to be scraped up. Um, which, I mean, I'm putting them out there so you can do with them as you wish. But and then, as I said, edit to your heart's content, clip them apart. Again, none of these are terribly designed for accessibility. None of the images have alt tags yet, or the the math notation, I think, is all in Microsoft Word's basic equation editor, which should be accessible. But you may have to check that on that. Um, all right, so there's either the magic QR code or the tiny URL to get to um, all that. And then let's see. Trying to see if anybody's asked any questions in the chat that.
The chat has been a good discussion about AI policies or policies
Okay.
related to testing and then AI statements and syllabi. So if you have anything to add to those two things, those have been the kind of
Ah,
conversations that are happening there.
um, well, my official statement, the syllabus is whatever the school tells me to put in there. My blunt statement in class is don't be stupid. Because you're not going to get it on the exams, right? I mean, that's what I tell my students. Same thing with the online homework, right? You're not going to get magic Google and whatever else on the exams. Let's do a basic lesson in percentages. If you make and you could even go to Desmos and put in sliders. Okay, yeah, I make 100% on my exam, on my homework. I'm going to make a 50% on the exams. Oops, not good. So I'm just real blunt with the students about that and just tell them, is there time for AI? Yeah. And that's when I pull out like, oh, you've got 12 different, I want a summary of this. Or there's a couple of them I show them, hey, if you have a bunch of chemistry notes and you need a summary of those chemistry notes, AI is great to generate 2 or 3 different practice tests and study pages with that. Um, that, I'm blanking on which one that is right now, but those sorts of
Notebook
things.
LM is the one that's pretty
Yes,
good for
yeah, that's it. Thank
taking.
you, thank you. Um, um, but I'm just real blunt with my students. Same thing with the online homework. I'm real blunt with them. Yeah, you could have a friend stand over your shoulder and pay them to answer your homework for you. It, it, you got to fail the exam. It's not helping. you know, don't be stupid about it. Um, but again, that's not obviously printed in my syllabus because don't be stupid would get me in trouble. Um, but then that's at the end of the day, as I tell them, AI is a tool. It's no better or worse than a handheld calculator or a cell phone or overhead transparencies. Remember when those were all the rage and were going to replace us? Um, any of that stuff, laptops in the classroom, whatever. It's a tool, and you got to be smart enough to use it. And on our end, I think it's the same answer that, there's a great scare that MOOCs were going to replace faculty back, what, 10-ish years ago, 10 years ago. No, and we never did. We're still here, right? We're not assuming you're doing well. Let me get into my soapbox a little bit. Assuming you're actually doing your job and not dialing it in, we're not replaceable.
I
Now,
just wanted to mention something I liked on that arc length problem that you showed. That's a good one for testing whether they have some number sense, because
yeah,
I noticed without following all the details, the answer comes out to less than 4, and you're going for x equals 1 to x equals 5. So
yeah,
there's no way the arc length can be shorter than a straight line. So I think that's a really good one to use to see if they understand the basic concepts, right? Because
and
91 over 24.
and there's another one of these I have students grade where the AI mixed the two methods. It mixed both the shells and um, dishwasher method. And so it looks good if you don't parse it carefully, but then, oh, wait. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is, and we talked to my students about, oh, let's see, wait, x to the 3 halves over 3 is roughly what sort of shape? And then I have them when I do an arc length, draw the line. Okay, now draw a rectangular box kind of around the curve, assuming the curve's not
Yep.
too goofy. And oh, that rectangle ought to have this length. So my answer ought to be somewhere between those two, you would think, right? And that ends up also sort of helping them to start thinking about, is this answer even reasonable? I picked some of that up. I have a physics colleague who's one of his questions is, some bullet flying through the air, and one of the answers is faster than the speed of light if you miss a calculation up. And invariably he'll have a quarter of the class answer faster than the speed of light for the bullet in air. It's like, you guys, right? But this is it. It's a tool. And there's horror stories, right, where a business has used AI and it deleted the whole data file. My brother's an attorney and he's won 3 courses in Georgia. He's won 3 cases now where the other party attorneys used AI to generate briefs and it made up court cases and citations. Um, and so this is the sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's always been a concern, right? The moment calculators came in, what's a hard question or not? The moment graphing calculators came in, what's a hard question or not? Um, and the chapters in the calculus textbook I use about graphing functions, calculate the first and second derivative, connect. No, that's really antiquated with Desmos and everything else. Just you know. Um, am I checking or grading homework? We are required to use an online homework system, Bob, and one of the many out there, right? And so but what I do with that is for every section, there's the homework, which is, wide open, answer the questions. But then I also have a timed quiz in the homework system, but it's not proctored. And I tell my students that the quiz is to um, just help them prep for the test. But then, yeah, I have paper assignments that I'm also grading. In my class, every day you show up, there's a quiz or an exam. One, it's a cheap attendance check, but then two, it's also we need to work on this stuff. Mathematics is a language you have to learn how to write and how to present. It's not a get a number answer. That's another one of my soapboxes at the start of the semester. It's not just a did you get an answer, it's how you got your answer. Um, and then when they start, and then I get on my other soapbox about partial credit. And well, if you go into the doctor for a knee operation and he operates on your ankle, are you suing for half malpractice? I mean, the knee's close to the ankle, right? They had the right idea, right? And you can see the students rolling their eyes and groaning and whatever. Um, but yeah, same deal with all this stuff. In my online classes now, I have the fallback option. If I think there's something funny, quote unquote, going on, I reserve the right to call the student in for a one-on-one Zoom exam where I just go back through the exam and, hey, from this, you did this problem. Um, and on the video, you didn't write anything down. In my Cal 3 class, you did a triple integral without writing anything down. So here, let me give you a similar one and let's see if you do this right now for me. Right. And that's cut way down on a lot of the silliness that goes on in online classes with exams and the mess. Has not cut it out, of course, but has cut it way down. And then actually, for those who are going to be at Philadelphia, my my session got approved. We'll actually be doing something similar to this of how do I come up with a lot of these questions, and we'll actually be creating a Google Doc where we're all going to post all these questions together. We can all share and have lots of ways to increase our students' knowledge. And so and for those who aren't going, just a week after the conference, email me. I'll send you the link to the Google Doc. But this, right, it's always been my opinion, we have to keep asking better and better questions because things keep changing, right? I mean, I'm just barely old enough that slide rules were kind of still around. Nobody's going to go back to slide rules. Nobody's saying that we need to go back to the good old days of slide rules. But come on, right? But we just have to keep asking questions that challenge our students' understanding and whatever that takes. So this is where some of this comes out. Anybody else? I have a few
Did you
more
want
minutes.
to chime in on the whether or not your campus allows for completely asynchronous classes, or do you guys require on-campus tests for classes?
No, so our online classes are fully online. We have one of the proctoring services that proctoring. I've got students. I mean, currently my class, I've got students that I know of in 4 different countries. Because one of them keeps asking for an extension because, quote, things are bad in his country, unquote. Um, and I'm just, that's, sorry, dude, but yeah. But in every online proctoring service, when you Google it, the first 2 or 3 links that pop up is how to cheat the system. So um, so that's the other thing I'm having to think about. And I've actually started going to more assessments in a shorter time frame just because one, reviewing the videos is but then also I can catch students up front. And I've actually instituted um, an online practice exam they have to finish by the end of the first week of class. That's just a 2-question basic arithmetic test, but it makes them go through the whole process of setting it up. We have what we call testing rules at my school about camera placement and position of hands and all that mess. And I go through all that and just, okay, hey, you did not set this up in the right way. You did not do this the right way. You did not, and that's also solved fair bit of headaches when it comes to the actual exam, being able to catch the students at first and say, hey, you did not set the camera up right. If you do that on the exam, that means a 0 until we talk about it. And that, again, catches most of them. I still have a couple of goofballs who, we were supposed to do the practice exam. And I'm trying to get permission. So in my undergrad, we had this linear programming class where one problem, if you remember linear programming in simplex, you can sometimes get multiple optimal solutions. We had to find all 12 multiple optimal solutions. And the professor's response was, I'm going to give this either a 1 or a 0 for the grade, and then I'm going to multiply that number times all your other exams. Right. So all the math geeks were like, oh, well, if I get a 0, I'm hosed. So we had to get 1s. And I'm tempted to, I've been trying to see if I can do that for the practice test to just, well, you get either 1 or 0. If you get a 0, then, but somehow my dean is not happy with that idea. But yeah, Jennifer posted, I'm in Texas. And no, we are in the interest of grasping lots of money. Students for our classes. Yeah, there's no in-person requirement and all that stuff. And our administration is much more interested in dollar signs than anything else right now. So we're fighting a hard battle with that. Jeff was asking about that. Yeah, no, we've tried. Thankfully, in my case, we're next door to Texas A&M and have several co-enrollment programs. And anytime the admin starts getting too flimsy, we can just say, well, we talked to A&M and they're not going to allow the transfer to go anymore if you do that, and that stops a lot of that discussion. Um, if you are having problems with that, you might want to talk to your transfer partners and see if they have any sort of lean or pull in that regard, and just I guess phrase it as expressing concern. Say, hey, is this a concern for y'all? Is this a possibility? Are you willing to talk with us or talk to our admin about this sort of thing? Because yeah, we're all in this together, and we all know how state budgets are going right now and everything else. So, uh,
To make things challenging, you have 10 minutes for Bob Capetta's very beefy question in the chat. How should the pre-calc curriculum be modernized? What topics could be eliminated and what could be added or strengthened?
oh, I wasn't going to touch that one, but now that you
I
forced my
noticed you
hand,
skipped past it.
uh, um, uh, I would, yeah, if I rule the math world, which is a scary thought for all of us, I would argue we need to start it as a function class. And trig is just a function. Everything up, well, what is this sign? It's a function. And we deal with functions and why we need these different types of functions, right? Why do we need a linear versus a polynomial versus an exponential in terms of growth rates or whatever? Why do we need trig functions? And then do we care about transformations? Well, a little bit, right? That, okay, I need to shift it up or down. Or if I do a linear regression, what does the y-intercept really mean? And is that meaningful or not? Or if I do modeling, right? If I do an Excel and a line of best fit, or if you did not know, you can edit Excel to do not only line, but quadratic or exponential, right? So if I do those, what does it mean if the intercept is this? Is that valid in this modeling context? I would tend to throw it in terms of everything's a model and modeling, because I mean the reality is that's what we're going to do with 90% of it. Yes, for the math majors, you could come back around. Maria Anderson used to talk about this. We ought to have a special math major class where we talk about factoring um, cubics. I mean, really, who needs to know how to factor a cubic? Nobody except a math major for making esoteric things. And yes, yeah, I know. I just threw open a whole can of worms, and we're all going to yell at each other. But and I would even factoring quadratics is not really needed for 80% of the people taking it until you do math, higher level math, and need to solve things explicitly. Because most of the quadratics you're going to see in the quote unquote real world, you're modeling, the coefficients are so crazy, they're not going to factor. But that's me, and if I ruled the math world, and if I could overhaul what they teach in K-12 also. But the reality is, and there are, if you, I forget the name of it, there's a couple of kind of college algebra books about modeling through spreadsheets that have some useful stuff like that. If you can squeeze in, I think we ought to be teaching a lot more spreadsheets too, because Lord knows spreadsheets are terribly useful. And in 80% of the people going into some form of a business environment are going to need spreadsheets. Yeah, functions and modeling. That's 80% of what pre-cal is really needed for. But that's, yeah, I'm not gonna change the math world, but
I will say
uh,
my campus, we did a curriculum retreat where we got out our pre-calc and our trig course outlines and sort of went through them and we're like, what do the students really need? And it was really eye-opening. Like our department rarely agrees on anything. And we were like, let's no, all of this, goodbye. Like we don't need to teach that. They don't need this. And what they do need it is they need it in Calc 2. And as a Calc 2 instructor, I reteach it in Calc 2 because they don't remember it from pre-calculus anyways.
yes, yeah. And we did some of that. There's also, at least in Texas, state standards where you can't get around some of that crap, but we try.
But
Yeah, if you can get your department to have a common discussion about that, about what do we really need,
covering
and
it, what does covering it really mean,
oh
right?
Lord, yes.
That's why you use that EASL framework from Maria Anderson that was brought up in the last yesterday. And it's sort of like go through your curriculum with that framework and be like, okay, they need to know this exists. I can show them the cubic. and move on. I don't need to assess that. I don't. Like, it exists. I
Yeah,
can factor.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can factor fourth degrees too, but oh Lord, I wouldn't want to. So, all right. Well, right there's an email or a Matic page, or depending on where you are, Magic Google. I'm at Blinn. There are other Rob EBs out there, as but yeah, if you have questions or want to work on more of this stuff or whatever, feel free to contact me. This or otherwise, thank you very much, and stop sharing.
Thank you, Rob. I'll remove your spotlight so that you're not big. Freaked me out when I was big.
Let's see. Wait, I need.
And I'll go ahead and share screen so everyone knows what's coming up next. I will say one of my big takeaways listening to you, Rob, was this idea that like the number of times I've used AI to quickly generate like a solution key or something because I'm just like, I don't have time to work this. Could you just give me what the answer to this is? And it's made a mistake and I've just corrected it and then gotten the new answer. And I'm like, I should be saving all of those chats so that I can show them to students and sort of why it's so important to be able to like look at these things critically, not just take them as is, because it does make mistakes. And I don't want to go back through all those chats and try to find all of those times that it was grossly incorrect.
Yeah, if you law tech, at least ChatGPT with math, if you hit the copy button down there, it tends to almost format. It may be the Math ML, I think, for web pages, but it's almost a law tech format even. Um, so that's even nicer. But yeah,
Oh,
if you put a blurb in there in format for a Word document, it tends to